Hello, welcome back to Bloodleaf. We're on chapter 10, which is the last chapter of part 1 of the book. I want you to pay attention about 2.5 pages into this chapter. There's a very vivid description of the city of Aklava. One of the activities that I've posted on Google Classroom is about that. So if you pay attention, it's on page 93. Pay attention to that part so that you can capture some of the details you might need to complete that activity. The other thing, once we finish with part 1 of the book, so at the end of this chapter, there's a character development, characterization activity, and it's all about seeing what Aurelia is like here in the first part of the book, because typically a protagonist in a novel is going to change over the course of the novel. So in order to see that change and learn why that's significant to the meaning of the story, you have to have a good understanding of what the character is like at the beginning. So through the first 10 chapters, if you recall anything of characterization, so this could be anything that she says about herself, any dialogue she has, any thoughts that she has, her actions, her appearance, what other people think about her, her interactions with other people, the effect that she has on other people, anything like that. All of that can be considered character development. So, 1 second. Yes. Okay. Sorry. So, character development and setting is what you want to pay attention to here at the end. And, yeah. Here we go. Chapter 10, page 90. We are not here. We are unseen. We are not here. We are unseen. I chanted Simon's cloaking spell long into the night, well after the blood I'd drawn to cast it had dried. When I was forced to stop and rest or risk falling unconscious from Falada's back, I murmured it into the darkness while I huddled for warmth in Kellen's cloak, listening to the mournful cries of wolves in the distance. We are not here. We are unseen. After a while, I could no longer tell if I was saying the words out loud or if they were just a chorus going round and round in my head. We are not here. We are unseen. We are not here. We are unseen. When I woke, I did not know at first how much time had passed. Inside the Ebonwild, there was very little difference between day and night. What light there was dim and gray, just enough to see the blood-stained slit in the fabric of Kellen's cloak, marking the path of Taurus's knife right before Kellen fell. He fell. Kellen, my best friend, my guard, my protector, the person who loved me, and, oh, Imperia, whose love I had rejected. He was gone. The noise that came out of me then was an unholy cross between a wail and a groan, and I shook there on the forest leafy floor, clutching at his cloak knotted in my fists. I rocked back and forth on my knees, coughing and sputtering between sobs, certain that this is what it felt like to drown. Falada nudged me tentatively with her nose, and through bleary eyes I saw what had gotten her attention. A fox was watching me from the trees. She was impossibly still, with flame-colored fur and eyes like golden discs. I got to my feet, my breath still coming in rapid staccato gasps. He was good, I told the fox. He didn't deserve this. She regarded me for another long moment, as if trying to make up her mind about me. Then she bolted back into the forest, gone as quickly as she had come. The fox's appearance jolted me back into reason. I was lost in a forest. If I stayed where I was, I'd die, from hunger or cold, or a creature with more malevolent intent than a fox. I owed it to Kellen to save Falada. I owed it to Kellen to save myself. I had to keep moving. But which direction? I was suspended between two impossible destinations. On one side was Aklava. I knew now that Taurus was headed there with a plan to pass Lisette off as me, to have her marry the prince and upset the entire monarchical line. On the other was Renault, where Simon and my mother were, hopefully, still holed away, safe from the tribunal closing in around them. I couldn't go announce myself into Aklava. Taurus and Lisette had my brother in their possession and had convinced him I was guilty of conspiring against Renault and Aklava both. If Conrad corroborated their claims of identity, whether through complicity or coercion, I had no way to prove otherwise. I'd face a charge of treason for even making the assertion. I couldn't go to Renault either. Simon was keeping my mother safe for now, but if I showed up on their doorstep, the tribunal would waste no time fixing the mistake they'd made when they killed Emily. And endangering myself meant endangering Simon, my mother. I took out the blood cloth, running my fingers over its surface. The 3 circles of blood remained, but one of them, Kellen's, had faded to the point of being nearly invisible. A third choice emerged. Keep going. Find another way to get inside Aklav's wall. Stay hidden from Taurus and make my plans from the shadows. It was about more than just me now. Whether I liked it or not, the fate of my nation was wrapped up in every choice I made from here on out. A cut had been made in the center of my life. I'd left behind the before and now had to face the after. I took a step, then another. I'll always consider that decision, to move instead of lying down to die in the Ebonwild, my first victory. As I went along, the only breaks in the monotony of the forest were little sightings of the Harbinger. She'd appear and vanish in the space of a breath, always just ahead, always out of reach. Whether Falada and I were following her or she was following us, I was never certain. But as the time drifted past, 1 day, 2, I couldn't tell, and my hunger and exhaustion began to toe the edge of delirium, the sight of her became a point of clarity upon which I could fix my attention. Despite all, Falada never faltered. She carried me through that long darkness and across the edge of the Ebonwild, stopping only when the trees suddenly broke and revealed the city in the distant basin below, as if she, too, was stunned at the reminder that others existed in the world. Here's where you want to pay attention. Eons of glaciers had carved out the bowl and left the cobalt blue water of the fjord, flanked on every side by rocky peaks. At the center of it all, where the mountains and forest and fjord water converged, stood the fortress city of Aklav. Storm clouds hung low and thick over the basin, but there was a perfect circle of clear sky above the city, as if the storm was circling an invisible barrier, angry at being denied entrance. This was the famed wall of Aklava, spelled to keep the uninvited from ever passing through its gates, and the reason Aklava's capital city had never fallen in all the long years of war with Renault. It was as if King Aklav had hewn it straight from a mountain and reassembled the stones as tightly as they were cut. 50 feet tall and at least 15 feet thick, the wall stretched in an unbroken ring over the crags and hollows and across the narrowest width of the fjord. Behind those unassailable walls was a complicated series of gray towers and steep turrets. The tallest of them stood in the center, pricking the circle of bare sky like a rapier. This was a place meant to endure even the worst assault. It was a place built to withstand armies and ages. It was dusk when Falada and I finally made our approach. There were fires dotting the outskirts of the wall, travelers' camps mostly. People, I guessed, who'd been ejected from the city and those who'd yet to be invited in. They clustered around the fires in threadbare blankets, and I shrank underneath the weight of their gazes as I dismounted Falada and let her pass them. "You're a long way from home, aren't you, miss?" The speaker was a man of late middle age, tall and thick, with gray-tinged stubble growing in unkempt patches across his ruddy cheeks and chin. He stood, a hammered tin cup in hand. "It's none of your business where I'm from," I said. He grinned, revealing a row of yellow teeth spread across his gums in irregular intervals. "You look tired and hungry, miss. Here, come sit with me. Rest. Have a drink." He clamped a fleshy paw around my wrist. I was staring at his offending hand and wondering which would be a more effective way to decline his invitation, kicking him in the groin or gouging out his eyes, when a raucous laugh came from nearby. "Go ahead, Darwin. Put the lassie on your lap. Get friendly. I'd pay a gold sovereign to see what happens when Erda comes back and sees it. Maybe this time she'll get your other ball." The man was pulling down papers tacked to the wall every few feet and gathering them into a pile in his arms. Darwin released his grip on my wrist. He said defensively, "It was just a nick, Ray. Erdy didn't mean it. I still got both my balls." "For now," Ray replied, tugging another paper down with a laugh. Darwin glowered at him and went back to his place next to his fire, self-consciously crossing his legs. "Thank you," I said to my would-be rescuer. "Mr. Thackeray. Raymond Thackeray." He shifted his pile of papers into one arm and rubbed his close-shorn white hair with his free hand. "Darwin isn't even the worst of 'em, miss. This place is crawling with the unseemly, who'd do a lady harm if given the chance." "And you, Mr. Thackeray?" I asked tenuously. "Are you one of them?" He barked another laugh. "Gonna get right down to it, aren't you? I could say no, but there's no real way to tell, is there?" "Please, sir, I just need some place to rest, just for a little while, and some food and water for my horse." "Nothing comes for free, miss. I won't try to peek beneath your dress like old Darwin there, but I ain't in the habit of feeding every stray that comes along neither. You got any money?" "No, I don't. Sorry." He gave a nonchalant shrug. "Too bad. Best keep moving then. Unless—" he scratched his chin. "Your horse. Is she an Empyrean?" My eyes narrowed. "I'm not selling my horse." Another paper came off the nail with a yank and joined the stack. "I'd give you a fair price, seeing as how she's in such bad shape. The girl's half dead." "No, not for any price." "Everybody has a price. I'd sell my mother for the right price." He shrugged again. "But she's a scheming harpy, so the price would probably end up being pretty low. Too bad for you, though. I've got fresh straw in my stable, and I was about to sit down to some vegetable soup." He put his back to me. "Wait!" I fumbled in my pocket and pulled out my charm bracelet, twisting off another charm. "Would this work?" I opened my fingers to reveal the topaz griffin, rearing on its hind legs, claws outstretched and curled tongue extended. He raised an eyebrow. "Well now, I suppose that would suffice." In a blink, he'd snatched it up and hidden it away in the ragged folds of his clothing. "This way now, miss." He led me past several other camps, gathering papers as he went. "Royal decrees," he said, sensing my curiosity. "King Donald issues a new one every few days and has them posted everywhere in and out of the city, generally demanding thanks for things he didn't do and praise for traits he doesn't possess. Every time, we think his proclamations couldn't get stupider until the next one." We stopped at a ramshackle structure of sticks and twine propped against the side of the wall, a few thin skins draped over the top. "I use 'em for kindling, see? Only thing old Donald is good for, starting fires." He crouched next to a smoking fire pit, crumpling the stolen decrees into balls and chuckling to himself as each new one smoldered and caught flame. "This is your stable?" I asked with chagrin. "And what is that smell?" "Oh, that." He knelt next to the fire and pointed above his head. "That's just old Gilroy." I cast my eyes upward to see an iron cage creaking high above our heads, chained to a hook on the wall's battlements. A gibbet, and inside, a jumble of bones and moldering flesh that had once been a man. My stomach heaved painfully, too empty to yield any relief by retching. "Gilroy was a friend of mine," Ray said, giving the remains a deferential tip of his cap. A ghostly face peered out from between the bars, returning a salute that Ray would never see. Got on the wrong side of His Majesty, beat him fair and square in a card game. Next thing any of us knows, he drew his thumb across his neck. Gilroy kind of deserved it, though. He should never have gone to the Stein and Flagon. It's Donald's favorite whorehouse. Everyone knows that. And he definitely shouldn't have sat down to a card game with the brute, no matter how slobber and drunk he was. But nobody ever accused Gilroy of being a genius. Gilroy's ghost made a crude hand gesture at him from the confines of his cage above. Oh well, Ray said. At least with Gilroy around, nobody tries to encroach on my territory, and he serves as a good reminder. I still had my hand over my nose. Of what? Of the fragility of existence, of course, and that King Donald is a bastard who reacts to losing a game of cards by executing the winner and then immediately issuing a decree banning cards altogether. He stood and shoved a bowl of something into my hands. There, eat up. Just got 2 more paragraphs. Shh. The soup was little more than tepid water and a few bobbing chunks of what might have been vegetables once. Thank you, I said, with as much sincerity as I could muster, and led Falada to the rickety stall. At least the straw was relatively clean, as Raymond promised. I took a few sips from the bowl and let Falada have the rest as I ran my hands over her white flanks. That's a good girl, I murmured. Unlike Ricky. You have served me so well. Kellen would be proud of you. Shh. The sound of his name aloud struck like a dagger in my heart, and I finally succumbed to the grim cocktail of exhaustion, rage, and bitter grief. With my back to Aklev's wall, I sank into the straw, buried my face in my knees, and closed my eyes. Now he's quiet. That is the end of chapter 10, and thus the end of part 1. So, if you haven't done any of the activities for Bloodleaf yet, I would go ahead and do some of those, if you're planning on doing any of them, before moving on to part 2. Part 2, I haven't looked yet to see how many actual parts are in the book, but I know part 2 is longer than part 1. There are 3 parts, and part 2 is the longest. So once we get into part 2, you're probably not going to want to go back and do anything with part 1. So I will see you for chapter 11, the beginning of part 2, in the next video. Ciao!